Hi friends, my name is Trisha Roberts, and I live in Australia, and this is a little bit of a different ANZAC Day message for people. If you look on Twitter, some people have challenged the idea of war, and also this idea of lest we forget, where we tend to forget about all the victims of war, which is ongoing, perpetual war, which is happening right now all over the world. And Australia is joining in on a lot of US-led wars today, and has for a long time now. And if you've been paying any attention to independent news, independent media, not mainstream media, but independent media, you realize that US wars are really about resources and hegemony. They're about oil, and they're about other resources, and they're about having full spectrum dominance everywhere. And if you've looked at war in general, it's always oligarchs who send civilians to war, send soldiers to war for them to fight for resources and for land. And this is no different today. With all the propaganda about it being sort of lest we forget, and all this sort of terribly honorable stuff that we go through, these sort of memorial sites, etc. I'm sure if a lot of those dead soldiers could talk, they would probably agree that war is immoral, and that they were used. They were used by the governments, by oligarchs, for resources and for land and hegemony. In fact, there was a famous general who said war is a racket, that he felt like he was like a mobster, and that he was going around, being like a mobster for oligarchs. And that's no different today. And that we can dress it up and fetishize war as much as we like, and use children in slouch diggers' hats to try and make it more palatable. And we can tell people we can tell people to join the defense forces, and then when they come back and they're terribly injured, or they end up killing themselves, which I think about 340 or more Australian soldiers have killed themselves in the last 17 years. It could be more. Does anybody really ask why that is? And one of the reasons is because the sort of things that we're doing today, and of course are done in all wars, are incredibly immoral and barbaric. Incredibly immoral and barbaric. And because they're human beings, no matter how much we might try and dehumanize them in training and make them non-thinkers, like they do in the United States, not question anything, no matter how much we might do that, they're still human beings, these soldiers, and they still have a conscience, hopefully. They're not just psychopaths, and of course there are people who join and are psychopaths, but the thing is that a lot of soldiers are just humans with consciences, and then they go and they engage in these dreadful acts where we're killing and maiming civilians, children, and their parents by the millions. In brown people, by the way, this is a sort of a white supremacist war we're engaging in, killing millions of brown people, just like you and I, for resources and hegemony. And the Iraq War was done on a lie, WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. That was a lie. There's no question about that. And this recent thing with Syria, if you look at independent news, and I'll leave some links on my Twitter site, it's at LiveVegan, LiveVegan. You can see a lot of independent journalists on my Twitter site. You can see that, you know, we've done this Syria intervention, which has been going on now for 7 years, is really about running an oil pipeline, and Saudi Arabia has an interest in that, running an oil pipeline up through Syria, and you know, that's one of the reasons they keep carrying on about Assad. You know, if the US really cared about humanitarian reasons for going into countries, if that was true, then they wouldn't have killed 500,000 children during in the early 90s in Iraq through sanctions. They wouldn't be backing they wouldn't be backing a Saudi genocide in Yemen right now as we speak, where one Yemeni child is killed, dies of malnutrition and disease every 10 minutes, and the US is refueling Saudi jets and is giving them lots and lots of weapons, billions and billions of dollars, not giving them, selling them. So is the UK, selling billions and billions of dollars of weapons so the Saudis can commit a genocide in Yemen. And that is happening right now. And of course, the corporate-owned media is not going to talk to you about that. So if we don't care, and this is the so-called, you know, the country, the US, who always claims that they're going into countries for humanitarian reasons. Well, that's a complete fabrication. That's just propaganda. I'm sorry. So, you know, if we don't care about what the US is doing, then Australia is just a lackey going along after this immoral pursuance of hegemony and resources. And if you've looked into these recent so-called alleged chemical attacks, they're very questionable. The one a few years ago was investigated by Seymour Hersh, an independent journalist, and he said it was not Assad who carried out that chemical attack. It's US-backed, quote-unquote, moderate rebels who have been involved. You know, the US has been backing and funding these so-called moderate rebels, which are actually they're actually terrorists. In fact, in the Congress, Tulsi Gabbard, a congresswoman, tried to introduce a bill which was so the US would stop funding terrorists. That was the bill that was introduced. So that gives you a little idea that they actually have to introduce bills in Congress, like Tulsi Gabbard tried to do, to stop that, to stop the US funding terrorists in places like Syria. And all of that started back with the Mujahideen in Iraq, you know, Wahhabism, and it's been an ongoing thing. You know, Wahhabism is used, it's a fundamentalism which is rejected by most Muslims and is used by the US as a political tool so they can go through the Middle East and gain hegemony and the resources in that region. If we don't know any history, then we are bound to repeat, as the quote goes, the mistakes of the past. And the fact is that the mainstream media is just a government mouthpiece at this point, and Australian people, a lot of them don't even know what's happening. US citizens don't really know what's happening. And if they do, and they're not calling out for the end of these perpetual wars, then what does that say about us? Does that say we're all racists and we don't care about brown people being killed by the millions in these Middle Eastern countries? So really, What kind of Australians are we that we say we're a multicultural country and we're so concerned about all these refugees, like as if they're coming from nowhere? They don't come out of a vacuum. The reason there are so many refugees, particularly from the Middle East, is because we are bombing the bejesus out of their country. We are destroying their countries for resources and hegemony. It's led by the US empire, and I call it an empire because it has 1,000 bases worldwide. We are being led by this empire, and we just do whatever they want. So, you know, we have to wake up, because even this most recent thing in Syria, I mean, they have the most warmongering neocons in Trump's cabinet. Not that any other administration was any better, but these are particularly warmongers, and they want to invade Iran. And they've been turning their sights on China and Russia because they see them as an economic threat. The Pentagon has even said that they view China and Russia as the problem now, not quote-unquote terrorism. So, you know, they're not even pretending anymore. So we have to, you know, we have to try and firstly get informed and look at independent media, and I post a lot of independent media on my page, and I please invite you to check out my Twitter site at LIVEVEGAN, and also you can look at my blog, Faint Signals from Viga.com. That's faint, F-A-I-N-T, signals, S-I-G-N-A-L-S, from Vega, V-E-G-A.com. You can check it out on YouTube. It's at Vegantrove, V-E-G-A-N-T-R-O-V-E. Anyway, I'll leave some, you can see the information in my Twitter account. But, you know, we need to get informed firstly, and then disseminate that information with Australian citizens and with everybody basically, and then start, start speaking out about this. Start a real anti-war movement, because eventually, you know, it all comes back to us. You know, these people don't just, these refugees on Nauru and Manus Island and all this sort of thing, they don't come out of nowhere. They come out of these immoral wars that we're being dragged into, whether willingly by our government oligarchs or not, I don't know, probably, because we get something out of it, don't we? But, you know, we're being dragged into these immoral wars, and these refugees are coming out of those situations. There's nothing humanitarian about it. If the U.S. truly believed in humanitarian reasons, they would get out of Syria and let the people take care of that situation themselves. They have agency. They don't need white people trying to help them. They were doing fine, thank you very much, before Obama decided to interfere with them. And the U.S., even in 1956, look it up, the CIA was meddling in 1956 in Syria, trying to overthrow governments, as they do. The CIA has meddled in 81 countries since 1946, was it 48, to 2000, and has overthrown 81 different governments worldwide, and many of them democratically elected. And that includes Australia. They've even admitted in 1975 they helped get rid of Gough Whitlam. They admitted that. That's not made up. If you look for an article by journalist John Pilger, he writes about that. In 1975, Gough Whitlam was, the CIA helped remove Gough Whitlam. He was a democratic socialist prime minister, and it's been a neoliberal downslide ever since. So we can thank the U.S. for their meddling. We are just one of 81 countries that the U.S. empire has been meddling with via the CIA. You know, we need to wake up, because this recent thing with Syria, which eventually will lead to Iran, invading Iran, what rights have we got to be going in this regime change business with these sovereign countries? This is just a white supremacist, all-out, you know, drive for resources and hegemony. full spectrum dominance for the US. We do not want to be participating in that. And these refugees are mostly a result of our meddling in these countries. And 700,000 Syrians have been killed, and 14 million are displaced. And it's mostly Western intervention, meddling, that has caused that. We need to own it. We need to stop blaming these countries that we've meddled in. It's like going into a house, setting fire to the house, and when the residents of the house come out, then we say to them, "You can't stay here. You can't stay here." You know, that's what this refugee crisis is like. We've been bombing their countries and killing them by the hundreds of thousands, in cases like Iraq, millions, and then we say, "We don't want you here," and then we stick them on some godforsaken place and treat them like complete rubbish, and we are responsible for them losing their country and having everything destroyed. How disgusting is that? So we Australians need to speak up against that. And we also need to, you know, encourage other people in the world to join in and reject this constant, perpetual warmongering. You know, it is a racket, as that particular general said. I think he was a general, or is it? Anyway, he was a very high-level military officer. And he said, war is a racket. It is a racket, and oligarchs always benefit. And we need to reject this fetishization of war. Have you noticed that every time there's an ANZAC war parade with ANZAC memorials, you'll see like Tanya Plibersek is looking down at a memorial, and she said, you know, lest we forget, and it's all, you know, the soldiers or whatever. What about the millions and millions of victims? And all these, you know, World War I was a complete, you know, sham. And World War II could have been stopped if people had been paying attention and hadn't been sort of making friends with Hitler, seriously, for quite a long time. And if you look into it, actually during World War II, US corporations were actually in Germany making stuff for the Nazis and profiting from it, and even at this is large industries like General Motors and Standard Oil. Standard Oil was providing synthetic fuel at one point, and then an additive, and General Motors was providing vehicles. I mean, have a look online. They've tried to censor a documentary about it, but it's how U.S. corporations profited during World War II. And General Motors, there's quite a bunch of them. There's like IBM, I think, helped with the stats for Auschwitz, and IG Farben, which was provided the gas that killed the people in the gas chambers. That company now is called Bayer. You know, the ones that make the aspirins, etc. I mean, you know, there's a whole, there's Coca-Cola as well. There's a whole list of, I'm not sure if Coca-Cola actually participated in that, but anyway, there's a whole list of US corporations that profited actually from making stuff for the Nazis. And that's where, you know, talk about, that's where corporations are. You know, they have absolutely no care about people. It's all about profits. So, you know, we need to stop sort of believing all this nonsense that the US is the bastion of all that's good and that we should be trundling along behind them like a little puppy and just not even question what they're being involved in. We need to stop doing that, because this thing with Syria could quite easily become, in the future, World War III. And World War III will last about, I don't know, an hour, because The nuclear weapons are like 70 times more powerful than what the US dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And by the way, Japan had already surrendered before they dropped those bombs on them, and so it was really more of an experiment to see what would happen. This is the country that claims that it's for freedom and democracy and intervenes for humanitarian reasons. They're the only country in the world that has dropped nuclear bombs on people, and they will have no compunction in trying to do that with Russia if they can get away with it, but they won't be able to get away with it because Russia actually has more technologically advanced nuclear weapons than they do. If Russia didn't have nuclear weapons at this point, it would probably be curtains for them at this point. And they're also after China. And we are trundling along like Australia is going along with this vilification of China now. You know, I mean, we are really, and if we, the Australian public, don't speak out against this, then we are complicit in our own, not only our own demise, but possibly in World War III, which will be nuclear. And it'll be the end of all of us. It'll be a nuclear winter, and that will be the end for all of us, including non-human animals who also belong on this planet, sentient animals. 99.99% of the population are animals. And I'm vegan because I recognize that, and I don't like to use sentient animals as resources. So that's something else we can think about, and I can talk about that another day. So anyway, I want you to, please, I implore you, to start saying to these politicians, like Bill Shorten and whomever else there is, that we have to stop going along with US empire and their warmongering, their perpetual warmongering. They're now in, I don't know, 8+ countries now, blowing them up and destroying them. And they're backing a genocide in Yemen as we speak, right now, backing the Saudi family and their genocide of Yemenis. Have you seen the photo I posted of a young boy? They recently, a couple of days ago, the Saudi family with their Air Force, which is backed by the US, they're fueled in the sky by the US. They bombed a wedding. This is not unusual. They bombed a wedding and killed 50 people, including the bride. And I'm not sure if the photo I posted is from that particular situation, but it was a young boy whose father was killed in a bombing just recently. He was very young. He looked like he was about 4 or 5. And he refused to leave his father's body. He wouldn't leave, and he stayed there. They took all the bodies away, and they tried to remove him. They removed the body, his father's body, the last one. And he laid there for hours, and he refused. He thought his father was going to wake up, and then he was going to take him home. And this is what we are following along with the US, and the US is backing this genocide in Yemen, backing the Saudis, and that's the result. He's just one of many thousands and thousands. There's been tens of thousands of children now have died in this genocide. They're bombing hospitals, they're stopping food from coming in, there's been malnutrition, there's cholera. Are we okay with that? Why are we backing this immoral empire? And it is an empire. It's got 1,000 bases worldwide. Why are we doing that? What kind of country, what kind of people are we to be okay with that? So when we say lest we forget, let's not make that a passive thing. Let's not only remember the all these soldiers, that a lot of them joined because they either had, they were, like in the United States, it's a poverty draft. They don't have a conscription, they have a poverty draft. A lot of people join because they can't afford any education or health care or whatever, and they join because of that. That's immoral, the social inequality. And we have social inequality here in Australia now. It's getting worse and worse and worse. I grew up in the 60s. I'm appalled. We have homeless people. We have, you know, we have people that can't afford housing anymore, and all sorts of things. And the wages are awful. The unions are being destroyed. We're a neoliberal nightmare. So, you know, when we say lest we forget, let's not make it passive. And we must think about we must stand up for all the millions of brown people overseas that we have participated in their bombing and killing of these civilians. We must remember all of them and speak out against this constant perpetual warmongering. And we must particularly make it known on days like ANZAC Day, instead of making it a sort of like a fetishization of war, or a sort of a sterilization of it. I mean, I find it appalling that we never mention victims. There are millions and millions and millions and millions of victims. There's a lot of soldiers, yes, but the people that the people that have been killed in these dreadful, immoral wars, and a war is immoral. There's nothing really wonderful about it at all. Nothing. The whole idea of war is immoral. And that includes what people think is the justified war, the World War II. As I said, if you look into that, that could have been stopped. It could have been stopped, and hardly anybody stopped it until, you know, Hitler, it took a long time for him to get to that point of control. There was a lot of factors in that. That could have been prevented. There is, you know, and then they divide land up. Every time a war happens, they divide other people's land up. So, and that's what happened to Palestine, you know, after one of these wars. They divided up the land and they gave it away. It wasn't theirs to give away. Palestine wasn't theirs to give away. And now look at that mess. There's an apartheid system in there, and there's a genocide of Palestinians. That's another whole other thing that's happening right now. So anyway, I just wanted to state my my sadness every time, particularly when I do anti-war stuff regularly, anti-imperialism, but every time ANZAC Day comes around and I see all these lest we forget, and there's no mention of the victims, there's no mention of what we're doing right now, as if war is finished. You know, we're doing more killing in more dreadful ways than ever before, droning people and just going into their homes and killing them. You know, that collateral. Did you ever see that thing by Chelsea Manning, that the whistleblower who released that video, Collateral Murder? Go and have a look for Collateral Murder and see U.S. Air Force people in helicopters mowing down people, and then mowing down the people that come to help, to their assistance, and running over people with tanks. And that is an everyday occurrence. Collateral Murder, the video of that incident in Iraq that Chelsea Manning was a whistleblower about and put in prison for 7 years but was sentenced to 35 years. That is an everyday occurrence. It's not some sort of aberration. That is an everyday occurrence. That is what we as Australians, the Australian Defence Forces, that's the kind of war, this is the kind of stuff that we're involved in. And, you know, at one point, 22 U.S. soldiers were killing themselves every day, suiciding every day after they're returning home. And why is that? Because these wars are absolutely appalling and immoral. That's why. And they do things there that they cannot live with. They see things they cannot live with. So if we truly care, we claim to care about soldiers who are just civilians that end up joining something that is appalling, if we truly say we care about them, then we have to be against war entirely. If we claim that we are trying to be anti-racist and we are not speaking out against war, any wars, then we are complicit. So that's really all I wanted to say. I hope that, you know, I mean, I don't want to see Australia become a sort of a mini US. I just don't. But I can see it happening. And it's appalling what we're doing overseas to brown people in these Middle Eastern countries. And it's appalling what the US is doing in other countries too. And it's appalling that we are being led to World War III as we speak by neocon warmongers like John Bolton, the National Security Advisor in the US government, and people like Pompeo, who actually believe there's some kind of a holy war between Christianity and Islam. These are the sort of lunatics, really psychopaths, that are helping drive this. But if Hillary Clinton had gotten in, it'd be the same, because the duopoly is just two wings of the same bird in the United States. The Democratic Party, the GOP, are two wings of the same bird. They're warmongering neoliberals, and they want full spectrum dominance via the military-industrial complex, and we are trotting along like we're a US lackey just doing their bidding. And that has to end. And I think Europe is starting to wake up, because they can see that they could be blown up in some sort of a war between Russia and China and the United States. And we need to wake up too, because we're very close to China, and if we keep, you know, just even in a selfish sense, we're very close to China. If we keep trotting along with this insatiable monster of the US empire with its insatiable military-industrial complex, if we keep trotting along there, well, who knows what will happen. But I don't want it all to end in a mushroom cloud, do you? Because it will, if we keep just sitting back and thinking things are somehow going to go along like this ad infinitum. They're not. It's not going to go on like this ad infinitum. It's going to come to a screeching halt at some point in a very, very bad way for all of us. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. That's Faint Signals from Vega. And if you just check out faintsignalsfromvega.com, you can see my vlogs. You can see my vlogs there. And I invite you to join, because I do numerous topics, and this is one that I like to focus on. It's very important, as well as veganism. Okay, thanks so much for watching. Till next time, bye for now.